What is learned helplessness? What does that really mean? I imagine this is a word that or a term that many of y'all have heard, and I want to speak to it a little bit more. There was a study done a long time ago that helped to create the foundations, the understanding of learned helplessness. And that really was this setup with lab rats where they would be on this, imagine it like this small miniature version of a tennis court. And instead of the net, there's like a gate in between. And one side of the floor has an electric shock system built into it, and the other side does not. And so, what they would do is turn that shock floor on, and when the gate is down, the rats relatively quickly learned instinctually to save themselves and to jump over from the shock floor to the safe floor. And this is human behavior. We're wired this way to protect ourselves, survival skills. But what they noted is when there was no ability to escape, when that barrier in the middle was up, and they would deliver the repeated shock, the rat would initially attempt to find a way over. After so many failed efforts and coming to a realization that there was no ability to escape, they would just stay still, stay very still, and endure. Endure is a good word for that, right? And then that created a conditioned response that we call learned helplessness, which looks like this. Those same rats that learned to endure and associated that shock with hunker down, there's no way to escape this. When the route of escape became an option and that barrier was lowered, when the shock was delivered, they would not jump over to the safe floor. They would stay frozen in place and endure, even though the opportunity was there for escape at this point, because this is just such now an override in their system connected to survival and a traumatic association. This is learned helplessness. We are so conditioned by these past ingrained traumas and patterning that later in life, as we're an adult who has a variety of options, we sometimes are blind to those options subconsciously, not intentionally, not with awareness, because it happens, those responses, they happen in nanoseconds. So this can look like we've done so much incredible growth and healing. And we feel like, man, I've stepped into this level of worthiness and self-honoring and love and empowerment and embodiment. And then this person who has a strong association with that childhood trauma seems to undo it on a dime. And that is a massive trauma trigger that is kicking in learned helplessness. So it's not that you don't have all those tools. It's not that you haven't done all that growth work. You have. You've not lost anything. You're just noticing a very physical override to your system that is happening through strong trauma triggers, which is learned helplessness. And how do we handle that then? with grace and self-compassion. That's the biggest thing. And bringing self-awareness to the table with it. Because like I said, that happens, that response of the dissociative shutdown, learned helplessness, draw away, and just function from what was the programmed response that we felt was our only option when we were a child around this person, when they acted in this way. That cascade and genuinely neurological, physiological response is happening within nanoseconds. It's not a mind over matter. It's not a weakness. It's a reality that deserves some compassion and awareness. Antecedent behavior consequence. What we're learning, and what I mean by that, the antecedent trigger behavior or response, or maybe I want to say reaction more so than response. Reaction, trigger, reaction, outcome. And then after those things happen, you can go like, oh, why did I function with that same patterning that led to the same consequence that almost doubled down on things? I didn't like that. You can't mind over matter your way out of it. You have to show up next to the realization of what is happening there in that internal response with putting a pause. So when that trauma trigger happens, the biggest thing that I recommend is to be prepared to know that that is going to happen, to expect it to happen, to expect. I may have some times where I feel this surge of this energy, this nervous system response, and that kicks me into this trapped feeling in this learned helplessness in this old patterning. And what my plan is for next time that I experience that is to put a pause in. Notice it, right? Sit with yourself, love yourself. And this will shift your behavior from reaction to choiceful response. And the response there is achievable through that pause. So now you're functioning in a choiceful, intentional, aligned way with who you are now, with a more full, broad range of acceptance of the 7 different options that are available to you at this point, not just one, not just the one that you had available as a child. That trauma gives us that tunnel vision. This is the only option for me to move forward. And it's like, ooh, you put that pause in, sit with me for a minute, feel the warm breeze on your face, look into my eyes. Let's just feel the sun on your cheek for a second. And then when you look over, the view feels very much different in terms of the tunnel vision is gone. And all in my periphery, I see an array of different choices of how I can move in this situation from a seat of empowerment that didn't feel like they were options to me 2 minutes earlier. That is a sacred pause. And that's where to start, I would say. Another analogy I use to explain this is through a tapestry, like a weaving of a tapestry, where you imagine in childhood when these things were being woven together, there was only one pattern and 2 colors in this tapestry. And so I'm visualizing this cream colored base to the tapestry with 2 solid black lines that run through it, very simple pattern. And so it's when this happens in my life, I've got 2 reactions to be able to choose from option A or option B, right? Choose myself and deal with the consequences of being berated or belittled or falling out of secure, safe connection with my caregivers, or abandon my own truths, my own emotions, and mimic back and reflect and function in alignment to obedience to make sure that I maintain this connection to my primary caregiver, which is not a choice at that point. It's a necessity and it's a survival skill. And so we've got these two options in this tapestry. And that's the tapestry we see in our programmed analytical mind the minute one of those people from the past or those trauma triggers or those scenarios kind of come up is like tapestry, option A or option B, right? Um, Stay in alignment with myself and feel unsafe in doing so, or abandon myself and act from this learned helpless place where I just feel a shock of this situation so that I can maintain a sense of safety, which at this point, now that you're an empowered adult, is an illusion because your safety isn't built on that. It was in the past. And now when we see this tapestry that has these two solid black lines, we know that's our cue to pause, to put that sacred pause there, to pull back inside of ourselves. You see those roundabout things that are at a kid's playground. I don't see as much of them now, but there used to be a lot more around when I was a kid. They were like these circular metal things that you just spin as fast as you can. You just stand on it and hold on, right? And you can look at that, and when it's going 20 miles per hour in one direction, and you notice like that's not the right direction, something's wrong there, I don't like that, you just need a second to take that sacred pause instead of trying to intervene when that is just has too much momentum going in the wrong direction, and you're going to risk hurting yourself more by reaching out to grab onto something like that instead of allowing yourself to ground, center, bring loving awareness and compassion to what just got triggered. And in that moment, when you're taking that notice and your eyes are off from that roundabout, by the time you look back over, it has come to a stop. And then you choose your response rather than getting sucked in to learned helplessness. I guess I'll say it that way.